When I close my eyes and drift back to the 1970s, the memories don't arrive gently. They come rushing in like a disco track turned up too loud, bright, unabashed, and full of strange little details no one today would believe actually existed. The colors were louder, the scents were stronger, and the advertising jingles were so persistent they nearly branded themselves into your soul. I was a young guy back then, gangly, wide-eyed, and convinced the world was only getting bigger and stranger in the best possible way. My mother, my sister Lisa, and nearly every girl I ever liked were walking billboards for the era's most outrageous products. And trust me, the guys weren't innocent either. We had our own odd obsessions, even if half of them came from trying to impress someone else. These aren't just memories. They're snapshots of a world built on avocado green appliances, shag carpeting, floral shampoo, powder drinks that glowed like nuclear waste, and health sandals that could double as medieval torture devices. Let me take you back. 1. Fabergé Organics Shampoo. When advertising became a chant, the first time I heard that famous line, I told 2 friends, and they told 2 friends. I didn't know it would define the soundscape of my teenage years. My sister Lisa repeated it nearly every morning as she brushed her hair in front of our fogged-up bathroom mirror. She said it jokingly at first, then not so jokingly, then obsessively, like saying the phrase was part of her personal hair care ritual. Our house always had a bottle of Fabergé Organics on display, not on the counter, mind you, on display. The shampoo had this halo around it in our minds, as though using it instantly aligned you with Farrah Fawcett's celestial hair. And if Farrah used something, you didn't question it. You followed. The commercial itself pulled you in with that hypnotic repetition, almost like a pyramid scheme of glossy hair. It became a cultural reflex. Everyone knew the chant, everyone imitated it, and everyone pretended they weren't falling for the marketing, even though we all were. Did it actually work? Well, let's just say it made your hair squeaky in a way that probably wasn't natural. But the scent, a soft, flowery sweetness, clung to the air long after the bathroom fan gave up trying. I wasn't the target audience, but I used it a few times myself, mostly because I had a crush on a girl named Mary who swore by the stuff. I figured if her hair smelled like Fabergé and my hair smelled like Fabergé, maybe fate would notice. It didn't, but my hair sure smelled great that week. 2. Gee, your hair smells terrific. The walk-by fragrance of every school hallway. Now this product, this one was a force. I don't think the world has seen a shampoo so proud of itself since. My girlfriend at the time, Annie, lived and breathed this stuff, maybe literally. She'd walk down the hallway at school, and the floral cloud around her arrived before she did. You could practically track her like a perfume comet. Teenage boys, myself very much included, acted nonchalant about it. Oh yeah, it smells fine. But the truth was, the scent made every adolescent nerve in our bodies light up like a pinball machine. It wasn't subtle. It wasn't soft. It was full-blown, in-your-face carnation that lingered like a guest who refused to leave. Whether the shampoo actually cleaned anything was anyone's guess. Half the girls said it left their hair flat. The other half swore it transformed them into goddesses. Nobody cared. It was social currency in a bottle. There were days when I'd be sitting in English class, and I'd catch a drift of that unmistakable smell, and it was like the entire period shifted. Suddenly, grammar didn't seem so oppressive. Suddenly, life had a soundtrack. Suddenly, You were aware of every heartbeat. My sister used it too. My mother said the scent was too much, but everything in the 70s was too much. That was the point. 3. Dr. Scholl's exercise sandals. Pain as a fashion statement. If you grew up in the 70s, you know the sound. That wooden clop, 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 echoing through every mall in America. Dr. Scholl's exercise sandals weren't optional. They were a rite of passage. Every girl I knew had a pair. My sister had 3, white, brown, and one pair she proudly painted with flowers to make them groovy. The commercials promised toned calves and perfect posture. The reality? They were essentially smooth pieces of wood strapped to your feet with one stiff leather band that dug into your skin like it held a grudge. The toe grip, that infamous little ridge, forced your toes to cling for dear life with every step. One summer afternoon, Lisa convinced me to try a pair just to see what it feels like. I lasted 5 steps. "People wear these by choice," I gasped. "They're fashionable," she said, barely containing her laugh. The truth was, the sandals were part shoe, part social badge. The girls who walked the hallways wearing them looked like they belonged to a secret society. Their blisters were like medals. If you had a pair, you weren't just keeping up. You were ahead. It was commitment, dedication, a tiny bit of masochism, and somehow it was cool. 4. Tang, the drink that made every kid feel like an astronaut. When Tang hit the mainstream, it exploded like a supernova, mostly because NASA had used it on space missions, and anything NASA touched instantly became sacred. If you were a kid in the 70s, you didn't just drink Tang. You embarked on Tang-fueled expeditions to the edges of imagination. My mother kept the orange tub right next to the sugar, and honestly, they looked nearly identical in color intensity. Tang wasn't just orange. It was aggressively orange. The kind of orange you'd expect from toxic chemicals or road construction signs. But oh, when that powder hit the water, the swirling cloud looked magical. The glass turned nuclear, and we kids felt like astronauts getting ready for launch. I'd sit at the kitchen table pretending I was being briefed by mission control, drinking my Tang from a plastic cup that slowly stained itself permanently orange. It didn't matter if it was too sweet or not sweet enough or tasted vaguely metallic. It tasted like imagination. To this day, if I see a plastic tumbler with a faint orange tint, I smile. 5. Clairol loving care. The smell of my mother. Trying not to age. My mother wasn't vain, but she wasn't about to let a few gray strands announce her age to the world. Enter Clairol loving care, the most misleadingly gentle-sounding hair dye in the history of hair dyes. She performed her coloring ritual like an ancient rite. Step 1. Towel you didn't mind ruining. Step 2. Plastic gloves that always tore at the fingertips. Step 3. The chemical scent that drifted through the house like a ghost that had unfinished business. The box always promised natural color. Sometimes it delivered. Sometimes it didn't. But after every session, Mom would look in the mirror with the kind of smile only small victories in life can produce. I admired her for that. And even though I'd never admit it to her then, I used the men's version when I hit my late 20s. The gray in my sideburns arrived early, and in the 80s that wasn't nearly as distinguished as people pretend now. So yes, men cared too. We just didn't talk about it. Not back then. 6. Tab, the pink status symbol of diet culture. Ah, Tab, that legendary, divisive, unforgettable pink can. Before Diet Coke even existed, Tab was it. It wasn't just a soda. It was an identity. Women in offices drank it like it was a secret potion for modern living. Teen girls sipped it at roller rinks, holding the can with a kind of casual flair that looked effortless and impossibly cool. But that taste, that unmistakable saccharine metallic mystery flavor, people either loved it or hated it. There was no middle. My girlfriend Annie adored Tab, said it made her feel light, whatever that meant. I tried one once after basketball practice. The shock of it nearly made me drop the can. But I kept drinking, partly because I wanted to understand its power, partly because Annie was watching. Tab felt futuristic in a way that only the 70s could define, not actually futuristic, but a vision of what the future might be if everything got a little stranger and a little more pink. 7. Avon perfume bottles. My mother's army of little glass creatures. No teenage boy ever admits to paying attention to perfume bottles, but Avon made that impossible. Our house had shelves of tiny glass sculptures filled with fragrances that ranged from mild to migraine-inducing. There were poodles, cars, boots, birds, seashells, miniature works of art that sparkled on my mother's dresser like a carnival of glass. The funny part? Nobody cared what the perfume smelled like. They bought the bottles for the bottle. It was collecting disguised as grooming. When my mother lined them up, it looked like a museum display, each one a character with a personality. I used to pick them up when no one was watching, turning them in the light like they held secrets. And when my mother caught me, she'd smile and say, "They're pretty, aren't they?" I'd shrug in the way only a teenage boy can, but yes, they were. Sea breeze and the secret rituals of growing up. If I had to choose a single product that defined what it felt like to be a teenager in the 1970s, I wouldn't pick a shampoo or a soda or even some flashy new gadget. I would pick Sea Breeze. That blue bottle sat on what felt like every bathroom counter in America, its liquid glimmering like a chemical ocean under the fluorescent lights. Teenagers didn't merely use it. We endured it, as though the sting were some necessary rite of passage. The first time I ever tried it was at my friend Danny's house. Danny had just turned 14 and declared himself committed to serious skin care, although he barely knew what that meant. We stood together in his cramped upstairs bathroom, its wallpaper covered with tiny sailboats that looked like they'd been peeling off for a decade. Danny handed me a cotton ball soaked with sea breeze and said with the gravitas of a surgeon, "Just swipe it once, maybe twice if you're brave." He wasn't exaggerating. The moment the liquid touched my cheek, the burn rushed across my face so fast I yelled loud enough for his mother to shout up the stairs, asking if we'd broken something. The smell was even stronger than the sting, sharp, clinical, with that unmistakable alcoholic edge that made you feel like you'd wandered into a pharmacy. But after the fire came the cool, and after the cool came the strange, almost exhilarating awareness that my skin felt clean. Not just clean, purified, like every teenage insecurity had been temporarily wiped off along with the oil and dirt. In a decade obsessed with looks, scents, and surfaces, Sea Breeze became our unofficial badge of effort, our way of showing the world that we were trying. Danny once used it 3 times in one day because he was terrified he'd break out before picture day. His face turned a kind of heroic pink, and his mother finally confiscated the bottle. But that was the thing about the 1970s. Effort mattered, even if it hurt. Sometimes, especially if it hurt. The world of shag carpeting, If sea breeze was the smell of the decade, shag carpeting was its touch. No one who didn't grow up then can fully understand the physical presence of that carpet. It wasn't just flooring, it was a personality. It swallowed your feet, your socks, your toys, your secrets. If you dropped something small onto a shag carpet, you had about a 50-50 chance of ever seeing it again. Our living room was covered in golden brown shag so thick it moved like fur when you brushed your hand across it. As a kid, I would lie on my stomach watching cartoons, and the carpet would rise up around my elbows like soft dunes. You'd vacuum it for an hour, and it still never looked quite clean. It didn't matter. Shag was comfort. Shag was warmth. Shag was modern. Friends would come over and immediately plop down onto the carpet instead of the couch. Adults sank into it with the same resigned acceptance you might give to an old armchair. Even the static shocks had their own charm. My sister and I would shuffle our feet until we built up enough electricity to zap each other, laughing like idiots every time. And it wasn't just the floors. The entire decade felt wrapped in softness. Curtains were heavy and patterned. Couches were wide and deeply cushioned. Lamps cast amber light that made every room glow like a late afternoon sunset. Even the air felt warmer back then, thick with the smell of pot roast, furniture polish, and whatever shampoo my sister had used that morning. The avocado green kingdom. The kitchen was the heart of every home, and in the 1970s it was almost always painted in one color, avocado green. People today look at those old kitchens and laugh, but at the time it was the height of style. The fridge, the stove, the dishwasher, the countertop appliances, all of them wearing the same deep green shade like soldiers in a very fashionable army. Our refrigerator hummed so loudly you could hear it from the living room, but my mother insisted it was the most reliable model ever made. The oven door squeaked when you opened it, sighing out a blast of heat that smelled like years of casseroles. The cabinets were a dark wood that paired with the green in a way designers today might call bold, though we just called it normal. On Sunday mornings, sunlight would stream through the yellow-tinted curtains and wash the whole room in a warm, almost buttery glow. My mother would cook bacon in her cast-iron skillet, and tang powder would swirl into juice on the table while my father read the paper. Even the ticking of the kitchen clock felt slower back then, as though time itself had softened to match the decor. The avocado era may look outdated now, but when I see an old appliance from that time in an antique store, something in me relaxes. That color wasn't just paint. It was comfort. The allure of waterbeds were the wild, untamed promise of adulthood. They represented freedom in a way no ordinary mattress could. You didn't just sleep on a waterbed, you drifted, you floated, you surrendered. The first person I ever knew who owned one was my older cousin Ray. Ray was everything I wanted to be at 15. He had a car that smelled faintly of gasoline and leather, sideburns that seemed perpetually perfect, and a confidence that made even the simplest things he said sound like commandments. When he told me he'd bought a waterbed, it felt like he was announcing he'd joined a secret society. His room had blacklight posters on the wall, glowing with electric blues and hot pinks. A beaded curtain hung over the doorway, clicking softly whenever someone passed through. And there, in the center, sat the waterbed. Its wooden frame shone with a dark, polished finish, and the mattress rippled gently even when untouched, like it breathed on its own. "Try sitting on it," Ray said. grinning like he knew exactly what would happen. The second I did, the bed shifted beneath me in slow waves. My balance disappeared. I grabbed at the frame, feeling ridiculous and amazed at the same time. "How do you sleep on this thing?" I asked. "You get used to it," Ray said, "and once you do, you never go back." He wasn't alone. Every teenager I knew dreamed of having one someday. Waterbeds showed up in store windows like symbols of sophisticated rebellion. They were in movies, in magazines, even in rumors. Stories about romantic escapades that no ordinary bed could ever inspire. Sure, the reality was less magical. They leaked, they sloshed, they were impossible to move, but none of that mattered. In the 1970s, the waterbed represented the future, and there was nothing we wanted more than to be part of whatever future was coming. Men's products and the quiet quest to feel grown. Women's products were loud, fragrant, glamorous. Men's products were fewer, simpler, quieter, but they carried just as much weight. Growing up, there came a moment when each of us began to pay attention to these things. Maybe it was the first time you noticed stubble on your chin, or the first time a girl smiled at you in a way that made your stomach twist. Whatever the trigger, suddenly the men's grooming shelf mattered. Old Spice was the staple. The bottle felt heavy in your hand, the scent unmistakable, spicy, sharp, full of confidence. Every father had it. Every teenage boy secretly used it long before he needed to shave. The first morning I splashed it on, I felt like I'd stepped into adulthood through some invisible door. Brute was for the bold. The ads were filled with rugged men who seemed able to build houses with their bare hands. The medallion on the bottle made it look like a trophy. Danny once said, wearing Brute made him feel dangerous, though the most dangerous thing he'd done at that point was ride his bike downhill without touching the brakes. We also had electric razors, sleek and humming like futuristic tools. Radios became personal possessions, portable treasures that let you carry your music with you wherever you went. Cameras captured memories in grainy snapshots that still sit in photo albums today, slightly faded but full of life. These products were our first introductions to identity. They taught us how to present ourselves, how to look, how to smell, how to become. The power of television and the spell of commercials. Television in the 1970s didn't just play in the background. It was the hearth of the home, the fire we gathered around every evening. The commercials of that era were woven into the rhythm of our lives. They arrived with their jingles, bold slogans, dramatic voices, and larger-than-life promises. Today's ads are polished, clever, algorithm-driven. Back then, commercials felt earnest, sometimes cheesy, sometimes over the top, but always unforgettable. When Farrah Fawcett tossed her hair in a shampoo commercial, it felt like a national event. Kids repeated the lines at school the next day. Even adults couldn't escape the chants. When those Avon ladies appeared at the doorbell with their glossy catalogs, my mother lit up like she was receiving a visit from royalty. Her friends would gather around the kitchen table flipping pages as though each bottle held the key to a better life. The Tang commercials with astronauts had every kid in America believing space was just around the corner. Somewhere out there, on some mission to the moon, a man in a shiny suit was drinking the same powdered orange drink I had at breakfast. That connection made you feel part of something bigger, something extraordinary. And then there was Tab. Every commercial for Tab seemed like a window into a glamorous adult world. women who looked confident, men who looked smitten, a lifestyle that seemed impossibly cool. I didn't care for the taste, but the image of that bright pink can stuck with me in a way I still can't shake. These commercials weren't about products, not really. They were about aspiration. They painted worlds just one purchase away. They sold not just items, but feelings, identity, possibility. They were also a kind of soundtrack. Even now, decades later, I'll find myself humming a jingle I haven't heard since the Carter administration. That's the power those little square screens had over us. The neighborhoods. We grew up in neighborhoods in the 1970s had a particular rhythm. Kids played outside until the streetlights came on. Parents leaned against door frames chatting about work, weather, and the latest gossip. Every driveway had a car someone was always tinkering with. Somebody's dad was always under the hood of a Mustang or Camaro, cursing at a carburetor while the smell of gasoline drifted through the air. Bikes were our freedom. Mine had a banana seat with chrome that caught the sun like a mirror. We rode for miles without ever thinking about it, coasting down hills with our hands lifted off the handlebars, pretending we were Evel Knievel. You'd find jump ramps made of plywood and cinder blocks scattered all over the neighborhood, each one a monument to reckless childhood bravery. The ice cream truck was a daily miracle. You could hear it minutes before it arrived, its jingling tune echoing through the warm air like a magical summons. Kids came running from every direction, coins rattling in their pockets. Even if you didn't have money, you still chased after it, as if your desire alone might earn you a treat. Every block had its own cast of characters. There was always the one house where the dad owned a state-of-the-art TV with a screen so big it felt like a movie theater. Another house had a dog so large it looked like a small bear. And somewhere in the neighborhood lived the mysterious teenager who worked on motorcycles in his garage and always had music blasting from a radio tune to the rock station. It felt like everyone belonged to everyone else. You knew the names of every kid, every sibling, every pet. You knew which parents handed out candy, which invited you inside for lemonade, which would scold you if you trampled their flower beds. It was a world where doors were often left unlocked, where people trusted each other because that was simply how life worked. The music that scored our lives. Every memory I have from that decade has a soundtrack. Music wasn't just entertainment. It was culture, expression, identity, rebellion, hope. The radio was always on somewhere, blasting from a car, drifting from an open window, humming softly from a kitchen counter. Vinyl records were treasures. I remember saving up money just to buy one album, studying the cover art for hours, reading every word on the sleeve as though it were literature. Dropping the needle onto the record and hearing the faint crackle before the music began was a ritual that felt sacred. Those songs became the emotional backdrop of our daily lives. They played during long car rides, during backyard barbecues, during awkward school dances, during afternoons when you were sure your heart had been broken beyond repair. And as teenagers, we carried radios with us everywhere, slung over shoulders, dangling from bike handlebars, held carefully in our hands like priceless relics. For guys like me, music was also a way to carve out a sense of self. You could tell so much about a person by which band logos they doodled on their notebooks. And even though my taste was always shifting, the feeling never changed. Music made us feel understood, even when the world around us made no sense. Late-night stores and the magic of shopping centers, shopping malls were temples of wonder. Walking into one felt like entering a little self-contained universe full of possibilities. The air conditioning hit you like a cold wave, the floors were polished to a gleam, and every storefront glowed with color. You could buy anything: records, clothes, frozen yogurt, gadgets you'd never seen before. But it wasn't just the malls. Smaller stores had their own magic. Gas stations stocked rows of tiny glass sodas that looked like jewels. Drugstores sold combs, razors, and aftershave displayed like artifacts of masculinity. Hardware stores smelled like cut lumber and machine oil, and I'd stand in the aisles just breathing it in, imagining myself a grown man in work boots, handling tools with confidence. Convenience stores were especially enchanting late at night. My friends and I would ride our bikes there in the summer, the glow of the neon signs casting long shadows behind us. Inside, the fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, illuminating rows of candy, chips, sodas, magazines, and all the strange little items that convenience stores always seem to carry for reasons nobody quite understands. We'd grab a couple of sodas, maybe a pack of baseball cards, and sit on the curb outside talking about everything that felt important at the time. Girls, school, music, dreams of the future. Sometimes I think those curbside conversations taught me more about life than any classroom ever did. The cars that defined a generation, cars in the 1970s, were more than transportation. They were statements. They were dreams on wheels. They were monuments to freedom, individuality, and youth. My father had a long boat of a car, one of those massive sedans with seats so soft you sank into them like cushions. It took up half the driveway. When he started it, the engine roared so loudly you could feel it in your chest. I used to sit in the passenger seat pretending to be a grown man, staring at the dashboard with its chrome knobs and glowing green dials. My friend Ray, the same cousin with the waterbed, owned a Camaro that every teenager in our neighborhood worshipped. The car gleamed under the sun, its paint smooth as glass. When he revved the engine, it echoed down the block like a call to adventure. Sometimes he'd let me ride along, and as we sped down the highway with the windows open and the radio blaring, I'd feel a kind of freedom I'd never known before. Everyone had their dream car back then. It didn't matter whether you'd ever own one. Dreaming was enough. And those dreams shaped us, pushed us toward adulthood, toward responsibility, toward the idea that someday we'd be behind the wheel of our own lives. The way time moved slower. One of the strangest things about the 1970s is how slowly time seemed to pass. Days had a different weight to them. We didn't hurry from task to task or from screen to screen the way people do now. Time had texture. You could feel it stretch, soften, take shape. After school, I'd often sit on the front steps of our house, backpack tossed aside, and just watch the light change. The sun would lower itself over the treetops, casting long shadows that drifted across the sidewalk. You could hear distant lawn mowers, the soft rustle of leaves, snatches of conversation a few houses away. Someone's dog barked. A neighbor watered her garden. The world was busy, but it wasn't frantic. When the streetlights flickered on, that was the signal. Kids wrapped up their games of tag or kickball. Parents called names from doorways. I remember the sound of screen doors slamming. Quick, metallic, familiar. It always felt like the punctuation at the end of a long chapter. In my room, the glow from my bedside lamp filled the space with a warmth you don't see much anymore. The bulb cast a golden halo across the wood paneling, turning everything into shades of amber. I'd read comic books until my eyes drooped, tales of heroes, adventurers, and space travelers who fought impossible battles but always found a way to win. They fit perfectly with the world I'd grown up in, a world fueled by imagination, glowing with promise. Basements, board games, and long evenings basements were their own universe. Ours had low ceilings, mismatched furniture, and a faint smell of cardboard and old paint. It was the place where kids gathered to trade baseball cards, play board games, or watch movies on a projector that clicked so loudly you could hear it upstairs. When my friend Brian's family bought a new color TV, we thought they were the richest people in the state. He hosted movie nights in his basement, where we sat on beanbag chairs and munched popcorn while the screen cast dancing colors across our faces. Board games weren't something you played for a few minutes. They were an entire evening. Monopoly went on for hours. Battleship brought out rivalries so intense you'd swear the fate of the Navy hung in the balance. Even simple games like Operation filled the room with suspense. Every time those metal tweezers buzzed against the edge, someone would jump and everyone would laugh. Winter nights were the best. Snow piled high against the windows. The furnace growled beneath the floorboards. We'd be in the basement, warm and content, while the storm raged outside. Someone's mom would bring down a plate of cookies, and for a moment, the whole world seemed to shrink into that cozy, cluttered space. Childhood wasn't perfect, but moments like those made it feel whole. School days and the world inside. Those walls, schools in the 70s, had their own aura. Hallways lined with mustard yellow lockers, bulletin boards decorated with construction paper cutouts, teachers who wore polyester suits or dresses with bold prints, the smell of pencil shavings mixed with chalk dust, the sharp clatter of typewriters from the business class, the buzz of overhead lights that always seemed a little too dim or a little too bright. In the mornings, kids would pile in wearing jackets lined with faux fur, scarves knitted by grandparents, backpacks that sagged with books. The cafeteria served foods that seem almost mythical now. Rectangular pizzas with edges crisp to perfection, mashed potatoes with mystery gravy, chocolate milk in small cartons that dented too easily. Hair was its own form of rebellion. Girls feathered it, curled it, sprayed it until it waved like the wings of birds. Boys parted theirs in the middle, tried to grow sideburns, or let it flop across their foreheads in what they hoped was a rock and roll sort of way. Some teachers disapproved, most students didn't care, and everywhere you turned, someone smelled like sea breeze, Brut, Fabergé, or that unmistakable floral explosion from G, your hair smells terrific. School was a landscape of scents, a collage of personal expression. Walking through the halls felt like stepping through a living catalog of the decade's greatest hits. Corner stores, candy, and the joy of a dollar bill. There was nothing quite like the feeling of having a single dollar bill in your pocket in the 70s. A dollar could buy so much: candy bars, soda, a comic book, maybe even a pack of baseball cards if you were lucky. Corner stores were treasure chests. The moment you pushed open the door, a little bell jingled overhead, and the smell of gum, sugar, and old wooden shelves hit you like a wave. The candy aisle was paradise. Wax bottles filled with sweet liquid, candy cigarettes that made every kid feel mischievous, jawbreakers so big they lasted days, pixie sticks, pop rocks, taffy that stuck to your teeth for an eternity, and always the baseball cards. You never knew which players you'd pull. The suspense made the whole experience electric. The man behind the counter knew every kid by name. He'd ask about school, sports, or how your parents were doing. He wasn't just a shopkeeper. He was part of the neighborhood's fabric. Sometimes he'd slip an extra piece of candy into your bag, telling you not to mention it. Small gestures like that stayed with you. After buying our loot, we'd sit on the curb outside, tearing open wrappers and trading snacks. The asphalt radiated heat in the summer. Cars rolled by slowly. The world felt huge and safe at the same time. Childhood was built from afternoons like those. The movies that filled our imaginations. Going to the movies was an event, not just a pastime. The theaters were dim and cavernous, with velvet seats that squeaked when you shifted your weight. The smell of buttered popcorn hung heavy in the air, mixing with the faint sweetness of spilled soda. The moment the lights dimmed, excitement rippled through the crowd like a current. We watched everything with wide eyes. Space adventures that made us dream of galaxies far away. Westerns where heroes rode into sunsets. Comedies that made us laugh so hard we couldn't breathe. Horror films we watched through our fingers because we couldn't bring ourselves to look away. Sometimes, after a movie, we'd reenact the scenes on the walk home, leaping across puddles like action heroes, mimicking sound effects, quoting lines until the adults told us to quiet down. Movies didn't just entertain us, they expanded our world. They gave us stories, language, imagination, and whenever a new gadget or product showed up in a film, we all wanted it instantly. That was the thing about growing up then. Entertainment didn't distract us from life. It shaped it. Family gatherings in the heart of the home. Family gatherings were noisy, crowded, and full of warmth. Holidays meant tables groaning under the weight of food. The smell of turkey or ham drifting through the house. Mashed potatoes whipped to perfection. Rolls that steamed when you broke them open. Aunts laughing in the kitchen. Uncles arguing about football in the living room. Kids darted between rooms like sparks, fueled by excitement and sugar. Board games sprawled across the floor. Someone inevitably spilled a drink. Someone always told the same joke they told every year, and yet no one minded. Tradition made everything sweeter. After dinner, my grandfather would settle into his favorite chair, an old recliner softened by decades of use, while the adults sipped coffee and talked about their lives. The room filled with the gentle hum of voices, the clinking of cups, the rustle of wrapping paper or cookie tins. The house seemed to breathe around us, holding us close in its warmth. These gatherings had a way of anchoring us. They reminded us that no matter how strange or fast the world outside became, home was steady. Home was familiar. Home was love, the transformative power of nostalgia. When I look back on the 1970s now, it isn't the flaws I remember. It isn't the frustrations, the mistakes, or the awkwardness, though there was plenty of all three. What I remember are the moments of stillness, of comfort, of discovery. The way the world felt open and hopeful, even when I didn't fully understand it. Nostalgia doesn't just bring back memories, it brings back sensations. The sting of sea breeze on a winter morning, the softness of shag carpet against your elbows, the glow of a lava lamp pulsing like a heartbeat, the taste of tang on a Saturday, the clatter of Dr. Scholl's sandals echoing down a school hallway, the wobble of a waterbed shifting under your weight, the scent of Old Spice lingering in the steam after a shower. Nostalgia reminds us who we were and who we were trying to become. The 1970s weren't perfect, They were loud, messy, exuberant, and sometimes absurd. But they were ours, they shaped us, and they left behind memories rich enough to fill a lifetime. Even now, when I walk into a vintage shop and catch sight of an old bottle of Fabergé, or a pair of wooden sandals, or a faded Avon figurine, something inside me stirs. It's a quiet, tender ache, a reminder of soft light, warm rooms, hopeful hearts, a reminder that the world was once new, and so were we.